right. Good evening, all. Welcome to our confidential number 104 with my special guest, Michael Lain of Liftport Group. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Terrific. Thanks for having me. Before we jump in, I wanted to comment on your logo. I like your logo. You probably think it looks like a piece of film, right? As you're climbing up, it looks like a piece of film running. Me, I immediately think space elevator. It's a ladder going up into the stars.
So. That works too. That works too. Actually, so we had the static logo of Aries Studios, and Dana Wagner, one of our key people, he just took it and made that whole animation by himself. With that, I was like, oh my god, that's awesome! So wow. We use it at the beginning of all of our live streams. Awesome. So, but anyway, welcome. Hey, welcome to everyone who's out there. I know we're just getting going here. And right, Sublette, how are you? Dave G Sound, it's good to see. Claude Sailing, some of our regulars are there. And while we're waiting for everyone to join the stream, I will warn everyone of two things. One, sometimes my internet's a little wonky, so we may freeze for a second, or you may lose us. The other is you may hear a lot of barking because we have 7 little, about 6-week-old puppies that we're fostering because we do a lot of rescue work. And these puppies and their mom we rescued about, let's see, today is the 3-week anniversary of rescuing them. And we had the mom for 2 weeks, and then the mom went to Amy, the rescue we work with, TLC Pet Rescue, and then this past Monday we picked up the puppies from Amy because Amy was overwhelmed. She had 27 dogs in her house, so we said we'll take the puppies back. We had Crystal and I had a little vacation last weekend, and we said okay, we'll take the puppies back. So it is adds a literal meaning to shitstorm. Sometimes. So, but they were all riled up about an hour ago and raising hell. And I think they've all gone to sleep. So that's good. And our dogs are mostly upstairs. So yeah, it's always an interesting experience. One day we were doing, about a year and a half ago, we were doing a stream, and my little dog Pee-wee just started having audible distress, right. And I had to shut down the stream, and we rushed him, and I was all alone without a car at the house, and my friend Dale drove over, picked me up, and we drove to the vet. So animals come first in our lives.
Yeah.
And there's a and there you go, there's Dale, Dale Simpson. Dale is my trusty right hand at Aries Studios, and then we have Mark Payton is here, Jim Westbrook is here. So yeah, a bunch of the regulars. So it's good to see. So Dale was helping out today. Tomorrow is our big day where we reassemble the bridge set that we have had at the new studio for the past 6 months unassembled. So we are all excited. It's going to be a big day. Thanks to all of you who are part of our Patreon. Listen, some business. Please hit the like button to help promote our videos. If you are not already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications. We got a lot of interesting things coming up on the stream. Sunday will be our very first Crypto 101 class, which is kind of like we're going to start introducing everyone in the Axanar universe to Web3, as it's called. Cryptocurrencies, NFTs, the metaverses, and my partner in our new venture, which we're trying to figure out the name for. Because we're already changing the name, and we just launched it. Mark Edward Lewis, who is our co-director, editor, and post-production supervisor of Axanar, and I will be introducing everyone to Web3. And this class will just be an overview about what it's all about, because boy, I've been drinking from the fire hose for the past 2 months, and I'm still just scratching the surface of Web3. It is just, and I'm a guy who had 2 technology companies. I started 2 tech companies 20 years ago, Web2, and I'm just like, wow, the blockchain is changing everything, which is part we're going to get to. Michael, let's first start with just give us some background, because I call you the space elevator guy. I know you've explained to me how the space elevator has morphed into the lunar elevator. We're going to get into all of that. Start with a little bit about your background, how you got into the space industry, and just take us through.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride. My part of the story really starts in really 2000, 2001, about 2001. I'll get into that in a second. But prior, I had a pretty, somewhat normal career. I went into the Marine Corps straight out of high school, did that for a couple of years, 4 years. Went on to school for a while, was an investment manager for a while. And then, like you, I ran an early internet company. Nothing anybody ever heard of. Like most everything in that era from 95 to 2001, most of those companies don't exist anymore. The ones that do are name brands like Wikipedia and Amazon and Craigslist and PayPal and a few others, but most of them don't exist anymore. So did that. And around 2001, I found myself in a pretty unique spot. I was in my early 30s trying to figure out kind of what's next in my life. I'd closed down the internet company. And I was fortunate that I wasn't wealthy by any standard, but I had more income than I necessarily needed because of my real estate. And that gave me an opportunity to kind of look around and just kind of cast a wide net about the things that I wanted to do. And here, I've always been a nerd, right? This is just one set of bookshelves. I have more at home. And so I'm like, gosh, I really want to do space, right? I'm the kid who used to skip high school to watch space shuttles launch and land on television. I lived in Washington State, so I couldn't just go and catch one. But I used to skip school to go watch space shuttles launch and land. And so I found myself like, wow, what is this space thing, right? What am I going to do when I grow up? And I had posted some stuff to space.com. Do you remember when message boards were a real thing, right?
Sure.
I mean, this long predates Reddit, so this goes back to Slashdot and space.com had a message board. So I posted something on that, and this guy contacted me. This is long before things went viral, but we probably had 600 or 700 or 800 messages on that board, or on my thread. It was about, how can we make space commercial, right? How do you do that? We've read all this science fiction. It's not in the Star Trek universe, but it is in the Heinlein universe. Everything's commercial. So that was my influence. And so how do you do that? And I posted something, and this guy, he turned into my business partner, but Dr. Brad Edwards contacted me via that message board. And he's like, hey, I want to talk to you about the space elevator. And I was really skeptical basically immediately. And, he came over, and I lived in Bremerton. He lived in Seattle, so it's not very far away. And it's not hyperbole to say that that meeting changed the course of my life. So I was really skeptical in the beginning, but over time I kind of became a bit of a true believer. And that was really fun, right? Those early days, 2001, 2, and 3, especially 2002 and 2003, were just amazing. They were really amazing. We went all over the country, met up with lots of really bright people. Edwards and I were a really good team in the beginning. We were never really great friends, but he had one part of the equation, the science, math, engineering, chemistry, physics. I had the other side of the equation, operations, finance, logistics, policy. So we had complementary skills. We got into a pretty big argument in early 2003. The space shuttle Columbia crashed. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, what are we going to do with the space elevator, right? Like, you just had a fiery reentry to tell everybody, okay, maybe the space shuttle's not the way to get to space. What is the right way to get to space? And so we got, we started working, right? I had my real estate. I primarily self-funded. So Edwards and I stopped working together. And, I want to be clear, your poster about the man behind the space elevator. I am one of many, many people behind the space elevator. But I was the president of Liftport Group, and we were and are still the only commercial company trying to go after a space elevator. Really recently, shout out to my friends, a guy named Dr. Pete Swan has recently created his own company to work on the Earth elevator. So hats off to him. Fingers crossed. I hope for the best for him. But we were it for a long time. So 2003, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You can see I've got robots behind me. So sorry, I'm trying to figure out.
I know. I do the same thing.
We got little ones made out of Legos. We've got one that's, and I'll bring this over in a minute, but we got one that's kind of made out of acrylic, so it's see-through. We got the first one. This is my favorite. This big clunky one is called Frankenstein. My best friend and I literally just went to his garage one day and we start pulling parts out. And the motors are made out of vacuum cleaners, and the rails for the shell are made out of window panes. And then over time, we got pretty good about building more and more real complicated systems. So this one climbed a mile into the sky.
Wow.
And we can get into that. There's a bunch of strings over here in this corner right there. You can't really see it, but we did a bunch of nanotechnology work. We did not make the strongest string in the world, but we did make some of the earliest strings. You know what? I'm just going to show you stuff. So this is the first draft of the elevator document. This they turned into NASA's Institute for Advanced Concepts. So I'm the second guy in the acknowledgement after Edwards' wife. So I played a pretty significant role there. And then so made a bunch of carbon nanotubes, turned that into string. This was, if it wasn't the world's first, it was a very early thing. Now, if I pull on this, it's just going to shred apart. It's super fragile.
Wow.
Very carefully. It is by no means strong, right? That's what we were trying for, and it didn't work. And fast forward 20 years, no one else in the world has figured out how to make a strong, commercially useful, mass producible string, right? Like this, right? There's some indications, there's some hints out of the UK. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening there. So I am very confident that that problem will eventually be solved. I'm frankly surprised it hasn't been solved yet. My team wasn't able to do it. We spent a couple $100,000, which, you know, in the scope of the billions that have been spent on carbon nanotube development, is kind of a drop in the bucket. But remember, mostly, not 100%, but mostly I was self-financed. So a couple $100,000 was a lot of cash flow for me. So we eventually had to stop that. But we did come up with something really interesting. We made a new alloy. We were trying to make something strong, but instead it's just very, very electrically conductive. So that was a big surprise. That was a big surprise.
Well, and which all reminds me of, you know, how we got the Post-it note, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the story.
And the story, for if you don't know the story of the Post-it note out there, it's three. You know, a scientist at 3M was trying to make like the strongest, toughest glue in the world, and instead he made the worst glue in the world, which is what's on Post-it notes.
yeah, easy to apply, easy to take off, simple, disposable. Yeah,
it's brilliant. Yeah,
that's our Post-it note story. So over time, this is all kind of 2003, 4, 5. We were mostly focused on nanotech. We could kind of see the writing on the wall. So 4, 5, 6, and 7 is when we shifted over into balloon development, robot development. We made I have to handle this very carefully because it's cracked. So let me get my hands in the right spot here. This bot is like 10 years old, and
wow.
There's a crack right there. We made this up in Seattle. There's the Pacific Science Center, and it has these arches outside. They're like 100 feet tall or something like that. And so we had this bot climbing up and down in the middle of the arches for Memorial Day weekend. It was super fun. It was an outreach project, super fun. But we made this specifically to be see-through so that people could see the parts, right? So you had a top sensor, you have the tracked wheels, right? So the ribbon goes down the center here, and the motors drive it. Carefully. Sorry. Circuit board, comms. You know, I don't remember whether this is an Arduino or Pi. We always have a little guy in there. That's Clark, Arthur A.C. Clarke, from the fiction, and then batteries. So this was. So that design became kind of our de facto standard, right? So all of our bots are tall and thin. They have to kind of be engineered a specific way, even though there's, oh my gosh, seeing this way. There's, I think, 7 modules in here. So you can easily see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's really hard to see the very top one and the very bottom one. So we got pretty good at that. Made specialty string to climb. So this is that mile-high ribbon. Fiberglass overlay with, you can see the kind of dark lines in the middle. That's carbon fiber. Now, carbon fiber is not to be confused with carbon nanotubes, very different, but carbon fibers is stuff that they make sports cars and golf clubs and rackets and stuff like that about. So so those were good years. Those were fun. And then and then all hell broke loose, right? Everybody knows about 2008, the financial crisis, but I had leveraged my property, and so I got hit with that real early. So 2007, everything just unraveled for me, and it happened really fast. So depending on which year we're talking about, I had between 6 and 14 people on my team, full-time, part-time, volunteers, but still a really dedicated team. And it just all unraveled really fast. So that was the end of the first version of Liftport. So all of that is focused on the Earth elevator. So let me tell you, I'm going to guess that a lot of people know about the Earth elevator, but I'm just going to give you the 30-second version. Imagine you have a ball and a string. You're spinning it over your head. The string in the middle stays straight, right? So now expand that to an Earth-sized system and attach it back to the Earth. So you have a counterweight out here attached back to the Earth. That the spin of the world, the 1,005 miles an hour that we're all experiencing right now, that spin keeps the ribbon straight. And we call that a centripetal elevator. Make sense? Okay. Yeah. All right. So all of that work, 2001 to 2007, all focused entirely on the Lunar Elevator. I'm just going to do a quick shout out. I see one of my fans on your chat. Hey, Martin, thanks for showing up, buddy.
Martin Horowitz, you know Martin Horowitz?
I do.
So do I. Yeah, I hung with Marty when we were in LA. He's a great guy.
World. Yeah, he's great. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you coming. So those were good days, right? We did a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of fun stuff. And it was really hard to kind of watch it all crumble because it crumbled really fast. It was pretty much overnight. 2008 went off to do a summer program at International Space University. That was terrific. I was really at a crossroads about whether or not I wanted to stick with the elevator because I literally just lost a fortune, like an actual definable fortune.
Oh, no.
I went from a net worth of $1.7 million to negative 600,000 in 24 hours. Yeah, it was a bad day. It was a bad day.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was, okay, things need to change, right? So I was in a pretty rough patch in 2008, 9, 10, 11, into 12. I bounced around a lot. I lived in Spain for a couple months for school. I went to Greece for nearly 6 months for work. I went to Canada for a year for work. I was just bouncing all over the world for a little while. If you're the space elevator guy, you're kind of unemployable, right? Like, just like think about it. Like, there's no path. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because really, we were talking about this yesterday. I think the great thing about America is not opportunity; it's our perspective on failure.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So as an entrepreneur, failing is not a problem.
Right.
If personally, you better learn from your failures.
Yeah, learn from it. Move
personally,
on.
But societally, there's no stigma to failure in society. It's the old story. The average millionaire. It used to be so the average millionaire has gone bankrupt 2.7 times or whatever it was. Right. Yeah. And I was like, "Ooh, geez, I'm almost there." Right. But I know that in our society we don't stigmatize failure. Whereas in Japan, part of the problem with the Japanese economy is if you fail, you're screwed. It's stigmatized. But here it's kind of like that whole Wild West rough and tumble.
Right.
We're going to make it work type thing.
Yeah. No. What I don't mean like, I don't mean people wouldn't hire me. They definitely were. I was a consultant. That's kind of how I paid the bills for a little while. I'm saying, if you have a chance to go change the world, to actually be one of the people who changes the world, there's kind of no desk job you can do that will satisfy you.
Okay.
I mean, I was unemployable because I wasn't a good employee.
You got moonwalker syndrome.
Right. Yes. Right. Exactly. So,
what's next? I walked on the moon. I mean, Jesus.
Right. Like, I dated an Olympic gold medalist a bunch of years ago, and she really had a problem with, what do I do next?
I can imagine.
It was right. What do you do next? Right. So, yeah.
Listen, I will tell you that back in 1989, when I was first coaching, I was a lawyer. I went to law school, passed the bar, got sworn in, and then I took a job coaching at USC, coaching men's volleyball.
Yeah.
And it was the best decision I ever made. I mean, it was crazy. But in 1989, in that summer, the summer after my first season at USC, I coached a boys volleyball team. And it was just like, it was the black sheep squadron of boys volleyball. It was like all these kids who were kicked off other teams. And we didn't have enough kids. We only had like 8 players on the team, whatever. But this ragtag team, we were able to achieve our goal. We won the gold medal at the Junior Olympics.
Wow. And
that was both the greatest day of my sports career, right, and the worst. That night, I was literally the most depressed I'd ever been in my life.
Yeah.
I went from the highest high to the lowest low, because I was like,
where do you go from here? Right? Yeah.
Now, the good news is the next year we won the NCAA championship. So that was the answer.
Nice.
No, but I know what you're saying. I mean, that's a microcosm of what a gold medalist or a moonwalker goes through. But you understand that you achieve something great and you're looking for what's the next. It's almost like, what's the next fix, right?
Yeah, right.
I hate to say it, but as a matter of fact, I remember saying back then, so this is what a drug addict feels like when they come down off the high.
Yeah. My dad still asks me when I'm going to get a real job. So those are interesting days, right? Bounced around a lot. Ran a Kickstarter in 2012. My mom had wound up falling, cracking a vertebra. So I was basically stuck at home. Here I am, like early 40s, moved in and helping my mom out. So those were rough days. She fully recovered, but it took a really long time. But I'm like, as a lark, I decided I was going to run a Kickstarter, and on the surface, it looks like a giant success. That's how I know. It was on the surface, it looked like a giant success because I asked for $8,000 and I got $110,000. But it was a giant catastrophe. I did everything wrong that you could possibly do wrong. The husk of that robot, I was going to build a robot. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. The husk of that robot's over there in the corner. It didn't work, right? The robot we were trying to do didn't work. The rewards didn't, only a fraction of the rewards, maybe a third of the rewards got sent out. Like it was a mess. It was thousands of dollars in the hole from it. So yeah, those were not great days. So that's kind of like Liftport 2.0. So that was maybe 2012 into 13, a little bit of 14. But some interesting stuff was happening here, right? So one, taking care of my mom, and then her husband, my stepdad of 30 years, gets cancer, gets his leg amputated, gets it amputated again. They give him prosthetic legs. He falls and breaks a hip, and then he dies. Right. So yeah. So he had some. So those were some really rough days. But through all that, going all the way back to 2006, a guy named Jerome Pearson had invented. So Pearson is one of the independent inventors of the Earth elevator, like decades after Siloskovsky invented it in Russia. But Pearson independently invented it. That's verified. He did that in the 70s. He's the guy who talked to Arthur C. Clarke about the space elevator, and that's how you get Fountains of Paradise. So that happened in the 70s. But in 2006, he invented a lunar elevator. Now, I wasn't paying attention to it then, but in 2008, and then again in 2010, and then again in 2011 and 12, we're like, man, this lunar thing, it could really be a thing, right? It could really work. And so what our requirements were, current materials, like purchase orderable materials, like everything had to work, whether it was the robotics, the string, the rocketry, the communications, all of it, all had to be purchase orderable technology. And that was the lunar elevator fit that requirement, right? We had to be able to launch it with a single launch, so that was a requirement, also a single launch, and it had to be cheap. I mean, cheap for space stuff. So we figured it's probably in the 800 million range. That number is actually probably high now because a lot has happened in the last 10 years. But yeah, that lunar elevator started just like bubbling to the surface, and we started really thinking about it. We closed down the second version of Liftport in 2014, kind of on the dregs of the Kickstarter. But I just couldn't let it go. So then in 2017, officially restarted, focused exclusively and only on the lunar elevator. And we've been pretty quiet for the first several years. I didn't have the same resources I had when I had the building. So it was usually just me and one or two other interns. I have had some really great staff.
You heard that?
I did. No worries. Don't worry about it. No big deal.
I think they're great. That sounded like puppies who are sleeping, having nightmares or dreams. Anyway, so can you explain the lunar elevator?
Yeah. So that's not really as well known. So
because I didn't know it until you told me about it.
Yeah. No, we kept this pretty quiet. I'll tell you. So here, I'm going to fast forward on something. So this is a military challenge coin from the chief scientist of U.S. Space Force. So we got
John Malkovich.
John Malkovich, exactly right.
I want John Malkovich's challenge coin. That's cool.
Yeah. No, so this is the honest to God real guy that Malkovich plays. Yep,
that's so awesome.
It is. He's an amazing guy. His name is Dr. Joel Mosier. And in 2018, 2018, that's right. We wound up flying down to Colorado Springs and given a presentation. So up until then, 2017 into 18, we were totally in stealth mode, basically talking to ourselves. And just doing paperwork, right? Writing papers. So we get invited out to talk to the chief scientist, and we showed him something that in his 30-year career he had never seen before. So I'm not claiming invention. That was Pearson. But we refined Pearson's plan to something that was buildable. So Pearson came up with something that required 80 space shuttles. Think about the cost of 80 space shuttles, right? The most expensive rocket that's ever been created, and he wants to have 80 of them. So I think the new space launch system is going to beat the space shuttle by expenses a lot, but another topic. So what we did, a couple people, a guy named Radley, a guy named Eubanks, several others, they refined that 80 launch solution into a single launch solution, priced it out at about $800 million. And we presented this to the chief scientist, and he's like, I've never seen this before. This is kind of amazing. And so while he's not in a position to, quote, back our play, right? He doesn't have a budget. He doesn't have, like, there's no mandate for Space Force. And by the way, this precedes Space Force. He was the chief scientist of Air Force Space Command at the time. And then when Space Force was created, he got promoted into that senior position. So he was a pretty remarkable guy, and he worked hard to kind of open some doors and help to validate what we're doing. He has to be really, really clear, can't endorse anything. That's not his job. He'll get in a lot of trouble. I'll lose my friendship with him. I have to be really clear about what that line is. But he definitely he's really intrigued by what we're doing, and he helped me and the rest of my team to say, okay, we have a place, we have a role, we should do this, we should pursue this. So again, we were still really quietly in stealth for a long time, really up until last year. So here's the Lunar Elevator, and stealth is too strong a word. That sounds all creepy and
yeah,
insecure.
Well, stealth mode is, and that's just kind of it's an interesting thing for you. You're just not publicizing, you're not advertising.
But so here's the Lunar Elevator. So here's the Earth on this side, right? Out on this side's the moon. So imagine, let's launch from the ground, go out to the moon, sink a string with an anchor basically into the surface of the moon, pull it back towards the Earth, not touching. I mean, it's still a long ways from the Earth, but the Earth's gravity gently pulls that string. And this spot right here is the Lagrange point. It's the gravitational middle, not the physical middle, but the gravitational middle between the two bodies. So you pull that string through, and that's the elevator. And so the Earth elevator is a centripetal elevator. The lunar elevator is a gravitational elevator. And with those two systems, you can plant elevators all over the solar system, right? So Mars could have some. Many of the moons of the big planets could have some. Whether they're rotating fast enough, or whether you've got a gravitational body to pull everything, you could build a super highway of elevators all across the solar system. Which that's a long ways away, but the lunar system, it can be built now with current tech. So wow. That's what we're primarily working on. And making progress, slow progress, but making progress. It's been an interesting, it's been a bumpy road, but there's progress there. Yeah. The lunar elevator, it's funny. Like I'm not trying to knock my friends in the Earth elevator business, because if you can think of all of space, everything is launch or satellites except this part, right? And then this is all the fringe stuff. Space elevators falls into that. And then if you look at the fringe of elevators, the lunar elevator is an even smaller community. So I don't want to knock my friends working on the Earth system. I don't really have a lunar escalator. Nice. I don't really have a lot of confidence in the Earth elevator anymore. It's one of those things where I feel like its time has kind of come and went.
Is it
again,
so the Earth elevator, the space elevators, us noobs call it, that idea, is it not feasible because of our current tech, or is it not feasible because there are better solutions, or
no.
what is it? What is it?
No, Alec, again, don't want to throw shade at my friends, but it's actually the tech that we have is better than elevators. The promise of elevators has been exceeded by the tech that we currently have, right?
So there are better options. Yeah.
Okay. So when Edwards and I started, there were launch costs were $30,000 to $50,000 per pound to get to orbit.
Okay.
Sorry, that's wrong. $15,000 to $25,000 per pound. And those were bonkers prices, right? Those are crazy. The space shuttle came in at $50,000 a pound. Yeah, it was nuts. And then fast forward, right? We had 400 satellites in the sky, and launch cost was, let's just say, $25,000 a pound for simple math. Fast forward, we have almost 8,000 satellites in the sky.
Oh my God!
Almost 8,000 right now, right? If you like the night sky, if you like stars at night, go out into your backyard wherever you are, take a picture, because every single day, every 3 days, honestly, every 3 days, we're launching new satellites into the sky. Every 3 days, somewhere in the world, somebody is launching a rocket. Every 3 days, we're putting new satellites in the sky. And within the Satellite Industry Association is tracking 80 to 100,000 satellites that will go into orbit in the next 5 to 10 years. And there's one constellation that's talking about 30,000, and another constellation that's talking about 30,000, and another constellation talking about 30,000. And there's one constellation that's talking about 300,000 satellites. Now, that's all bonkers, right? That's not the world we live in right now. But Amazon, we all know what SpaceX is doing, Starlink. One corporation, one company has a third of all functioning satellites. One company has I don't know, 1,500 to 1,800 satellites. One company, right? Another company has 200 satellites, right? So companies have more assets than nation states now.
Wow.
Right. That's the environment of space. So you've got massive reduction in launch costs. The Edwards report, the NIAC report, they were targeting $400 to $1,000 per pound with an idea how you could bring it down to $100 a pound. I'm writing a paper right now called the Starship Singularity that it's detailing like what happens when SpaceX's Starship comes online and changes the whole world by producing launch costs at $100 a pound. SpaceX will have launch costs at $100 a pound within the next, I'm going to say 7 years, 2035 at the very, very latest, 2035 at the very latest, $100 a pound to orbit. So why would you spend a multi-billion-dollar asset on building an Earth elevator that, if it succeeds, is going to bring prices down to $100 a pound, or maybe $50, or maybe $10 is the lowest estimate I know? How can you possibly recoup your investment on a $10 a pound price to orbit? The thing is how do you dodge it? Like, so the space elevator has always been designed to be on a ship, and so the ship moves. And when there's 400 satellites in the sky, you can induce an oscillation and miss those satellites. But if you've got 30,000, 80,000, right? Like, how do you do that? How can you possibly do that? So, and then the last piece is orbital debris. Now the guy I mentioned earlier, Dr. Swan, he's done a study. He thinks they have a solution to orbital debris, basically make it wide enough at the impact sites. He did that study before Russia, US, China, India, and then Russia again launched anti-satellite tests and put millions of debris elements up there. To point out, each of these nations, 4 nations, they did it first: Russia, America, China, India. Everybody was really mad that India did it because we're like, you guys aren't, like, you're not in this race. Like, don't be a bad guy, don't be a jerk, right? But they did, right? And then Russia did again just a few months ago, just before the war. And so the first time you do it, you're signaling capability. The second time you do it, you're signaling willingness, right? So this is the state that we're at now. Russia's posturing to potentially, like, really mess up orbits. Nobody knows that for sure.
So there was a good question. Here's why aren't we actively doing something? Why aren't we actively going up there and knocking stuff out of orbit to burn up in the atmosphere?
We are. It's just beginning. There's companies called like Astroscale. There's about 4 or 5. Somebody's posting about space garbage truck companies. Those are being built. They are. Yeah, they're coming into existence. Some of these companies are funded in the multi-hundred million range, right? Wow. Because it's that big a problem.
Right. I keep hearing about it. I keep saying it's shocking because, they talk about, tracking the space route. Tracking it, get rid of it.
Get rid of it.
Yeah. Right. Why are we just getting rid of it if there's all this stuff up there?
I'm gonna do a shout out to one of my professional colleagues, and we had him on our show. I don't know, a month and a half ago. He did a demo. So there's like 4 companies involved. They go out, they capture the debris. That's like step 1. There's actually several steps to that. Let's just assume that happened, and then you get it. And so what my friend Gary is working on is basically an orbital smelting system to melt the raw product that's brought in. It's all jaggedy and sharp, and the metal is rough. Melting that into slag and turning that slag into useful product for extrusion into 3D printing, can be turned into a power supply for our fuel supply for rocketry. They're working on some pretty interesting stuff. That's
wow.
Company called Lunar Industries. So the garbage truck is only one part of the problem. There's an entire ecosystem that's being developed off Earth. We call it the cislunar econosphere, and it's developing pretty fast. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of companies going after different parts of that econosphere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to the chief scientist. About 2 years ago, he was up on stage, and Dr. Mosier is talking to a very specific crowd, the Space Frontier Foundation, and he says a quote I'll just never forget. He says, "The next global power conflict, whatever it is, is going to be won or lost based on the abilities of the commercial space sector." Right? That is the chief scientist of Space Force going on record saying the commercial space sector is really doing some amazing things. Like there's lunar mining, There's settlement on the moon. There's people trying to figure out how to have babies on orbit. That's like the Holy Grail problem.
And it's the it seems, and it could just be an ethnocentric view, but it seems the United States is in the lead in the commercialization.
We are. It's not just being Americentric. It's an actual fact.
And that is, I'm guessing, just because of the advantages entrepreneurs have in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
All of them, whether that's cultural, whether it's political, whether it's financial. I mean, Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley because it's in the United States. There's no Silicon Valley really anywhere else quite like, I mean, you can say, hey, Portugal's great for whatever.
Yeah.
It's still.
I mean, it goes back to your comment earlier about, the problems of failure in this country versus other countries. I worked on a venture capital project in both Canada and in Greece. Both of them went nowhere. They went nowhere, largely because of cultural problems. There was 400 million euros set aside in Greece, and there was 700 million Canadian dollars set aside, and both of those VC projects ultimately failed because of cultural problems. Not the money was there, but they wouldn't risk it. They wouldn't risk it. So, there's you have this thing where the dot-com billionaires are getting a bad rap for billionaires going to space, but they're only the ones in the headlines, right? Because they're billionaires. But there's hundreds or thousands of very credible companies doing really big stuff in space. Friends down at Redwire, they had a company called Made in Space. It's only 9 years old. And they went from the campus of Singularity University 9 years ago to a publicly traded company 6 months ago.
Wow.
And they have $400 million in the bank, and they have 400 million or 500 million in contracts from NASA. And no one's ever even heard of these guys, but they're real companies doing real stuff. And then there's NanoRacks, now run by Voyager Space. That's a roll-up strategy where VCs and angels are basically betting really heavy on these companies that are good at life support or construction or whatever, satellite deployment. It's there's a whole bunch, and we talk about it in our event series, Better Futures, right? That's what we're talking about exclusively is to really point to all the amazing things happening in space right now. It's so much fun. There's so much going on. It feels like those science fiction books I referenced, right? It feels like that we're in that spot where we're building it. And My Lunar Elevator is only a portion of a much bigger story, right? This is old data. I don't have current data. The one satellite network, the DirecTV network, they make $100 million a month off of their satellite system. And that's kind of dead tech compared to other things, right?
Right.
So that's just the beginning, right? The space industry is already a multi-billion dollar industry, probably $5-10 billion in just venture money in the last 10 years, invested venture money in the last 10 years. And it's about a $300 billion economy, right?
So let's talk about that. So tell me how crypto Web3 is going to change the space industry.
I can think of a couple ways. not a plug, full disclosure. I have.
We're not financial advisors.
Right, yeah.
This is for educational and informational purposes.
I have $600. 600. That's all. I have $600 in a coin called Mars Coin.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. They are working on something really, really interesting. And I think that there are use cases for many coins in space. Think of the speed of light and the time difference between Mars and here, and then say, okay, can you trust a blockchain that's Earth-centric on Mars? Probably not. So you need a separate tool there, and that because it's based off of the original Bitcoin code, it's very codable and changeable and upgradable. So there's an active dev team that is working to make the coin for Mars the standard de facto currency unit on Mars. Like, I find that idea fascinating. Also, I'm a fan of the Mars Society. The Mars Society has, I think, 1 million coins, right? So the organization that's kind of like supercharging the idea of going to Mars, they didn't create the coin. They were gifted that coin by the creators. So there's that, right? I'm a little more skeptical. There's a moon coin that's somewhat similar. I'm a lot more skeptical of it. But let's say you want to develop a plot of land on Mars. Like, let's just fast forward into the future. Musk is able to get Starship to happen. He's launching, 3 ships a day to Mars, which is his plan. Then what, right? So now you've got settlement on Mars. Well, I like this canyon, right? This canyon's a pretty nice canyon. I'm gonna put my stamp on it. How do you claim it, right? It's not like the Wild West days in the U.S. where you just put 3 rocks on a stump, and that's the boundary marker for my house, right? So using blockchain technology to transfer goods and services, to assign ownership, and to be a digital form of cash and capital. I think that's just scratching the surface. I think there's a ton of other things you could do with it. I think pretty much every organization is going to have to operate off of digital currency pretty soon. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I am a true believer there.
You keep hearing, we keep talking about it. It's like the crypto in currency environment, ecosphere is $2 trillion industry right now, and it's going to be 15 trillion by the end of the decade. And I keep saying 15 trillion. That sounds kind of low to me, right? The way it's expanding, it's like 3%, and only 3% of the world is tapped into crypto. But that is the more I get into it, the more I am just so firmly convinced that this is changing the world. Unlike, yes, the internet, since the internet,
right?
Not Web 2, since the internet was invented, since we really started adapting the internet as something. There's been nothing as revolutionary or as potentially benefit. It's just opening up markets. It's creating opportunities. Which is really what gets me. It's not the potential to invest in crypto. It's the potential to do things with crypto.
Right.
That's what really blows my mind. It's like,
we don't even understand. In the same way that building the first pages in HTML using Notepad, which is what my team did in 1996.
Oh my God!
There's no way you could have predicted, the world that we live in now. There's just no way, and that's why I referenced this paper I'm writing called the Starship Singularity. I'm writing 2, one for Starship and one for Starlink. because the spacecraft allows for one kind of interesting future, and the satellite network allows for a different kind of future. And both of those are going to change everything that we know. And I'm going to say it, Alec. I think the changes coming in space are bigger than the changes coming in the disruptive crypto space, because there are organizations that are going to be using that technology as we move out into the moon, out to space stations, out to Mars, and out into the asteroids, and there are people, sane, rational, funded people, that are working on how do we get to another star, right? Zuckerberg is funding a program to send a probe to another star, and other people I know are working on how to send people to another star. So I think crypto is going to be a story. It's going to be a headline for sure. Blockchain is going to be a headline, but I think the real story is how humans move to space en masse. I think that's that. There will never be another moment like the moment that we're living in right now. Never.
Well, I always reference and I think I've mentioned to you, I always reference a TED talk I heard where the gentleman was talking about how when you think of where you're going to be in 10 years, it's going to be so different from where you think you're going to be in 10 years. And if you look back to where you were 10 years ago, where you thought you would be today, it's nowhere near where you thought you would be today. Right. And so because of that, I think it's true. It's like things are happening from just learning from you in the space industry that are like, oh my God, really? Because we keep thinking of space in the way we've been brought up over, right, so many years, to think, oh, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this. But those were all conventional thoughts based on the knowledge of the time. Right. And when that knowledge so fundamentally changes, and it's not, the future doesn't go like this. The future's going like this. Yeah. Because you didn't think of all that stuff. Nope. And in a way, just to tie it back, it's like what we talk about Star Trek, and when we talk about what Star Trek is in the future, and how we should be envisioning it and portraying Star Trek. I mean, like in the 60s, we thought the bridge of the Enterprise would look like that, right? Because that's what we had. We had just come out of the 50s and Forbidden Planet, so we thought that was, hey, no, Star Trek's going to look like this. And now you look at what we think, the future, the bridge of the Enterprise is going to look like. It's entirely different. And honestly, the people doing the new Star Treks are holding back because, let's face it, Picard is a lot more closer to how you're going to control it. And the whole Minority Report thing is a lot more realistic than I'm going to be pressing buttons on a panel. You're not going to be doing that. We're going to be lucky if there's not a chip in your brain and you're just thinking about what you're going to be doing. We kind of already know what some of those things are going to look like. If you take some screenshots of either a Blue Origin capsule or a SpaceX capsule, no one in the sky is piloting anything, right? No, right. You get your greasy paws off of our machine. We'll take it from here. Thank you very much. Right? So it's all being controlled by the ground. It's all, figuratively millions, possibly billions of lines of code, and all tested super well. Like I think that we're done with the days of human pilots. I think those days are probably coming to an end pretty fast. And I know when Chris Weave and I talk on about this, and he has a show with Pat called Starship Tactical, which we often talk about what that looks like. It's like the whole thing about people giving commands, the captain of the Enterprise giving commands. That's not going to work that way. Nope. You may say, hey, ship, take us, do this. And that's the last thing you ever say. Right. The ship figures everything out. The whole idea that if you're in a space battle, you're telling the ship when to fire. It's like, no, you're not. No one's piloting the ship. It's happening too fast.
Yeah.
And the computers are too amazing, and they're going to do everything by themselves.
Yeah.
You're just going to say, hey, those are, you're going to enter into the computer before you ever get there. This is what we're trying to achieve. And then, boom, everything else. So
Space Force's real money, like actual R&D budget, is going towards algorithms.
Oh, I bet.
Right? Faster than
AI.
Faster than thought warfare. Like when I was a kid in the Marine Corps, everybody was talking about over the horizon warfare, right?
Right.
They didn't have drones. Right. But you could sense the faster than light warfare, faster than thought warfare scares the crap out of me, right? Like that I gotta say I'm a little nervous about. Like, make sure those algorithms are good, right? I'm hoping that we're still a long ways off from that, but the R&D budget so I kind of break everything into kind of 4 parts. There's ACDC, academic, civil, defense, and commercial, right? So for a really long time, the world that we grew up in, the world that Star Trek was formed in, right? That was a very much an academic and civil with a little bit of spice from defense, right? And these 3 actors did everything. They did everything in space, right? NASA went to the moon, civil went to the moon with the help of the academics. Right. The military was totally not on board. But Russia, it was all about defense and academics, and civil was not on board, right? So that was the original space race, and that's all of our formative ideas for space. But in really only the last 10 years, the commercial sector is like, I'll take it from here. I got this. And it's a world that I've been in this field for 20 years, and there's no way I could have predicted where we would be today. I had hope, but I couldn't have guessed where we are now. And then the fact that we're going back to the moon, and there's 100 missions planned for the moon. 100 missions. And that's not just the US. Definitely the US is the vanguard leading, but private companies, other governments now, hats off to India and Israel for making, $150 million craters in the moon, right? So thanks for trying, guys. Keep up the good work. Do it again. But the whole world's going back to the moon. And I think that, just further validates my Lunar Elevator. And we didn't talk about the thing that I think is like the key point to the elevator, which is the space station, right? Go back to the moon on this side, the Earth on this side, and then this spot. That gravitational middle attached to the moon means you can build the largest space station ever, right? You can build a giant space station. I look at numbers of 15,000 people on the space station.
Wow.
Like, what does that look like? And there are 11 space stations in design or development. Now I only have confidence in 7 of them, but I have confidence in 7 of them. They are like, 4 of them are government programs, and 3 of them have at least $100 million in the checking account. At least $100 million in revenues, contracted revenues.
Nice.
So, I mean, is that enough to build a space station? Probably not, but it's a step.
It's a start.
It's a step.
All right, so as we wind this up, and we can always have you back. We're going to get back to what we do, which is filmmaking. And I want you to tell me, give me kind of like your top 5 near Earth space sci-fi movies. What What are those? And it doesn't have to be sci-fi. As
Yeah,
just space. What
Yeah.
it could be the right stuff or whatever. Tell me what are your, give me 5, and it doesn't have to be.
I'm going to give credit to a not particularly good movie, but Gravity. Gravity started it started a new class of sci-fi where it was smart sci-fi. That was researched, that of course they're not going to get everything right, but they got a lot of stuff right. Like they actually put effort into that to get some of the parts right. So hats off to them. What is that, nearly 10 years old now, 7 years old, but it started a whole new genre of sci-fi. So hats off to them. I do like The Martian. I do.
Oh, I love The Martian.
I do.
The book and the book is phenomenal.
The book's on my shelf.
The book is phenomenal. Andy Weir's actually an Axanar fan too. I got to meet him in Chattaby. Yeah,
awesome.
He's an awesome guy. And that book is just that is just such a great book.
It's well done. Shout out to one of my professors, recently retired. NASA senior administrator Jim Green was a technical consultant on that.
Oh, very cool.
So like he tried to make it look good. I'm gonna tell you a recent movie. Everybody should boo and hiss at me, but the best bad science movie I've ever seen just came out. It's called Moonfall.
Oh God.
I'm like in the theater and I'm leaning over to my best friend and I'm like, that's not how gravity works.
They got something so basic like gravity.
That's not.
Oh my God. I know that movie is, I can't even think of watching it. It's like, that is just it. Yeah. That's a, talk about a train wreck. That's a moon wreck.
Yeah. Curiously, the YouTube channel Kirkazot did a video on what would happen if the moon crashed into the Earth about the same time the movie came out.
Oh, so wow, that's
totally coincident. But I'm like, oh, that's how gravity works, right? So Kirkazot's pretty good at theirs.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So those would be like my top 3, including the bad one. But I see a lot of. I see a lot of sci-fi. One I really liked, gosh.
Here, I'll pitch it. I finally told Crystal the other day, I'm adding when I have my list of here are my top 10 movies, here are my second 10, and I have my guilty pleasure movies like Armageddon. But I'm coming up with a new list, and that is movies you have to watch when you see it on TV. And for me, it's kind of always been the movies on that list are like Shawshank Redemption, Field of Dreams. I can't turn it. It's on. I gotta watch it.
Right?
I gotta watch it. It's so great. And the new one that makes that list is Hidden Figures.
Oh, brilliant!
Hidden Figures is just so freaking compelling. I mean, I cannot watch it.
I went and saw that with my mom. So I'm 54. She's 77. I guess it came out 3 years ago or something like that. So my mom was the 3rd woman in the Army's teletype repair class. So what's a teletype? Imagine a fax machine the size of a refrigerator. and she was a woman in that program. My mom was bawling during that movie, because she and afterwards, I mean, the conversation I had with her over dinner and coffee, I mean, it lasted for hours, and she's just told me so many stories, because she was down in Alabama, down in Georgia during those days when that was happening, and she told me some pretty crazy stories I'd never heard before. So Hidden Figures, 1, it's an amazing story, and 2, just the connection I have with
That's awesome.
my mom's role as being the third woman, and all the crap that she put up with being the third woman in that Army program. So, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I love that stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna leave you with one other movie that I have a big soft spot in my heart for, and I really want to go and take this movie and redo all the effects to it, and that's Marooned. Gregory Peck, Gene Hackman, Tony, Jane Franciscus, Richard Crenna, Lee Grant, David Jansen. 1960, or maybe it was 1970. Yeah. I'm trying to think if it was before or after Silent Running. I think it was after Silent Running. But based on the Martin Caidin novel, Martin Caidin, who of course wrote The $6 Million Man, which was called Cyborg, in book form. He wrote Marooned, which is originally about a Mercury astronaut stranded in space. But the movie took it and transferred it to basically an Apollo Skylab crew.
Wow.
That movie is awesome.
I'll go look for that.
You haven't seen it?
No, I don't know.
Oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me.
No, I don't know it.
Really?
Well, and then
that's crazy that you don't know that movie. You have got to. I don't know where it's available. Someone will tell me.
I'll go.
Got to. Sure. No, that's a must see because it's unfortunately the space effects are really dated at this point. But everything else is brilliant. Everything else in that movie is just freaking brilliant.
Okay, all right. So Earth elevator. Every person, every space elevator guy in every movie, the space elevator guy is crazy, narcissistic and crazy, and the elevator comes down, right?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Well, that's what's fun. It's just we got to figure out how to crash this thing.
Yeah. So I'm not totally in love with those stories. But gosh, think about all of the space stations being created. You have so many things to work with, right? There's a lot of space stations coming online, so you will have a great audience for that. That sounds cool. I will definitely look at that.
Marooned is 1969 is when it came out. Okay. I can't believe that. Also, based on the 1964 novel Marooned by Martin Caidin. So I don't know where it's. I don't know where you can find it right now. But maybe if someone knows, they can let us know. All right. Oh, here. So did I. My dad took me to see it in the movie theater, and of course our good friend Martin. There you go. So, all right, I've got to go. I've got chores to take care of, but absolutely a pleasure having you on. We will absolutely do it again sometime.
Terrific.
And thanks so much, and keep us posted, as I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
Everyone out there in the audience, thank you. Hey, once again, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you have not subscribed already. Hit the notifications bell so you get to find out about our future endeavors here. Big weekend for us tomorrow. We are putting the bridge back together, so we're real excited about that. If you're a member of our Patreon campaign, I haven't been advertising that as I should, but please check out our Patreon campaign down there. You can find it. Go to patreon.com/Aries Studios and support the studio. It is a big year for the studio. We've got so much planned, and hopefully we are back next month filming the next shoot of Axanar. We're getting the studio back together. I cannot wait till the bridge is back together because we do so many live streams from the bridge as well, and everything else. So everyone, thank you. As always, live long and prosper, my friends, and we will see you around the galaxy. Thank you so much, Michael, and we'll look forward to having you back another time so you can keep us posted on what is happening with all things practical space, as I'd like to call it. So take care, all.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.